Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and this is a follow-up video to my previous intro to Django video. So in that first video we kind of learned how to set up a Django project and the basics of just working with Django out of the box, which is generally built to build the whole web application using templates and all that. But another way you can use Django is to create an API. Okay, and then you can use whatever framework you like to consume that API. We'll also do a React front-end build, but that React front-end can then as easily be done in Vue, Angular, Solid.js, Svelte, using web components, Riot.js, whatever you feel like using. Okay, um, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to VS Code, and we're going to create a new Django app. But before I do that, there's a couple of libraries I want to install. Okay, so I'm going to open up my terminal. And first thing I need to do is turn on my virtual environment. And if you don't know what a virtual environment is, I advise watching that intro to the Django video first. I go into all those kind of details and we set up this virtual environment. So I'm going to do source.venv/bin/activate. That's going to activate the virtual environment. Okay, and I can tell it's activated because I see this venv thing right there. I'm going to clear the terminal just so that way it's all easy to see. And then what I'm going to do is do Django before we start a new project, I want to do pip install Django REST framework. So that's going to be for setting up an API with Django. You can do it without Django, okay? So for example, if you want to learn how to do it without Django REST framework, which arguably isn't necessarily like really worth doing, like Django REST framework makes the process much easier, and yeah, it's a little bit more like it's not Django isn't really built with that out of the box. So it can be a little funky, but I do have a blog post on it. So if you go to grokoverflow.com, that's my blog, and you go to the blog and you search for Django, okay, you'll see like here I do have a tutorial where I go over how to create an API without Django REST framework, just so you can see what that would look like. If you were just using purely Django, what would setting up a JSON API look like? That is here. But generally, most people who create REST APIs with Django are going to use the Django REST framework. So we're going to go into that, and I'm going to just kind of scroll the way down here. So another library I'd like to install, I know it gets mentioned around here somewhere. So we're not going to get into deployment, so we don't have to worry about that right now. Do I mention cores in this particular setup? Okay, that's for authentication, so that means what we're looking for is right before that. Django install REST framework. Okay, so this just shows you how to use REST framework. We'll have that up there because we're going to be following these exact steps. But I also want to make sure I install Django cores. Okay, again, cores headers are needed so that way your front end can communicate with your back end. I can create the API pretty easily without this, but then my front end application is going to have trouble communicating with my back end because it's not sending over the proper headers for the browser to let those requests come through. So I'm going to be using this library right here, Django cores headers, and we'll be setting that up as well. So I'm going to just copy that to clipboard, or really just Django cores headers. So I'm also going to install Django cores headers, and those are the only two libraries I really need at the moment. Okay, if you want to do authentication, also on this blog post, I do have a section here where I walk you through how to set up authentication with JWT tokens, so JWT authentication using Django. Just follow the steps down here. For a very basic authentication, you can always customize all these things. You just have to read the documentation. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to create basically the same API we did or the same model that we did in the previous video where we created a to-dos model. So, but just now we're going to do it as a REST API. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the Django project. So Django admin start project, and we'll call this to-do API. So there it creates my new to-do API project. So I'm going to go cd into that. cd to-do API. So I'm in there. And first thing I want to do is I'm going to want to create an app for our to-do model or to-do API. Okay, so I'm going to say Django admin start app to-do. Okay, and then that should create. Okay, do you mean Django admin? Oops, I forgot the dash. Okay, there we go, and then we got the to-do app. So again, the first thing I'm going to need to do is connect that app to the settings.py in sort of like that root application with the settings.py. So again, if you remember right, the way I connect that is going to be like to-do.apps.todo.config. Again, that's the path that I need to set up in here. So I'm going to head over to settings.py. I am going to go to where do I want to go? Over here to install apps. And then I want to install, again, it's going to be to do, because that's the app. Then in there's going to be the apps file. And in there should be a to-do config. Okay? And that's going to connect my app. Yay. Then next, I'm going to want to create my model. Okay, so I'm going to head back to my to-do thing here and create my model. So again, we're going to create a class called to-do that's going to inherit from models.model. And it's going to have two properties, subject. Actually, we'll just follow the exact same way we did in the previous video, which is title, which is going to equal a models.car field. And then again, it's going to say max length equals, we'll say 140. Then a subject models.car field max length 300. And actually, that should be details. So it's the details of the to-do. Okay, cool. So there is my model. Now what's going to happen with Django REST Framework, normally I would just take that model, I would create views that would render templates. Okay, and I can use that to-do model to then create data inside those views. But what we're going to do is we want to send the data back out as JSON. Okay, and the problem is that if you use the default way that Django works, it doesn't create what you would normally expect a JSON API return. It creates like this object that has like a PK field, which stands for primary key, and then inside of it there's a property called fields, and then there's going to be all the properties. Usually what you expect is an array of objects that perfectly match this, so a bunch of objects or a bunch of JavaScript objects that have title and details inside of them. Okay, that's what I expect. So that's what Django REST Framework does for us. It's going to serialize, which means take what's originally there and change it to something else into a format that we want. So we need to create what's called a serializer. That's going to be the thing that takes what we get out of the database and what Django naturally creates in its query sets and turn it into sort of like the JSON format, something that's formatted in the way that we want our JSON to be. Okay, so we're going to create a new file called serializers.py. It doesn't have to be, it can be called literally whatever you want. It's just these are the conventions, and this is what other people, again, the reason why you follow conventions is because when you work on a team of developers, if everyone's following the same conventions, then it's much easier to understand what your coworkers are doing, and you can be much more productive. Okay, it's not just because you just want everyone to conform. Okay, because you do need to be creative as a developer, but you also don't need to make things more obfuscated or harder to understand. So again, we created our model. Okay, and actually let's add this property. So this property here, class meta. So again, this class meta is a subclass you can add to certain things in Django, and what it does allows you to define certain things that are not particular. So for forms and models, it's going to allow you to define things that aren't properties. Because again, when you're creating a model, what you're doing is you're creating like the definition of a unit of data. So all the properties in the class should be properties of that model. But there's going to be things related to the model that are not properties of it that you want to define, like what word should Django use when we refer to many of these things. So I'm just going to define that just because why not? Okay, so I'm going to head back to models, and we'll just paste in that metal class. Okay, and again, this verbose name plural should represent how we refer to multiples of these, so to-dos. Okay, and I do think also in the sense that it'll actually use that, because usually you use the plural as the table name. So in that case, I would assume that it's going to make a table called to-dos, although I think Django has like a little bit more complicated naming convention, but not something we ever have to worry about because we never work directly with a database. If you take advantage of Django, Django will just kind of take care of all that for you. Okay, so wonderful. Now that we have that, we want to create our serializers. So we're going to head over to that serializers.py, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to import our model. because we want to connect it to our serializer class. And again, the job of the serializer class is to say, okay, hey, you query the database. The data from that query needs to be turned into something that looks good for a JSON API. Okay, so essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to import this class that you see right here. Okay, and basically what's going to happen is that we're then going to create the class, and then we basically tell it in the meta class, hey, this dog is, or in this case for us, it's going to be to do. This class is what you're serializing, so that's the model you use for doing queries. And then these are the fields that I want included in the output. Because you might have a field, you may not want every piece of data showing up in that JSON output. So this allows you to kind of say, hey, I don't want everything. These are the things I do want. Okay, so that's essentially what we're going to do. So again, I'm going to head over to serializers.py. I'm going to say from Django REST framework dot serializers, although did I spell that right? It's just REST framework. From REST framework dot serializers import hyperlink model serializer. Let me just make sure that's the right class. Yep, hyperlinked model serializer. Okay, and then we're going to create a new class, which is going to be called to-do serializer, which we are going to serialize. So that's going to inherit from hyperlinked model serializer. So again, basically all the methods and functions are inherited from that base class. Okay, I don't need to know how that base class is implemented, and like the exact code that created it. That's the beauty of, inheritance. The idea is I can inherit all this functionality, and I just need to define the things that are unique. And the things that are going to be unique for each serializer is not what it does. It's always going to just take data and serialize it. What's unique is what model I'm serializing and what data from that model I want serialized. Okay, so that's all I have to define. And then the base class does the rest of the work. How nice is that? Okay, so we're going to just say class meta. Okay, and then that meta class will define like the model. Okay, which is going to equal, we need to import the model. So from dot models, because it's in the same folder, import to do. So you'll say the model is to do, and then the fields are going to equal, we pass in the list, and we're going to want to include title and subject. Those are the two fields. Actually, and I'd also like to include ID, because each thing should have an ID, and I want to make sure we receive that, because that will be useful when we build our front end. Okay, so ID, title, and subject. That's how each object should look like. Okay, wonderful. And now that we have that, that's going to do the serializing. So the next we're going to do a view. Now usually we can create our own views by either writing functions or using some of the built-in classes in Django called like class-based views, which are just classes that already have functions built in for a lot of different scenarios. And then what you can do is you can connect that class to a set of routes, and it just saves you a lot of time. Or aka view sets. Now the Django REST framework library has its own built-in view sets for a JSON API. So all the logic of making the query and then serializing it to JSON and then returning it as JSON, all of that's already kind of done for you. Okay, all we have to do is just say, okay, just kind of like we did with the serializer where we inherited that functionality, we're going to do the same thing with the view set. We're going to say, hey, we want this view set. We're going to inherit it and then just say, okay, well, for this inherited class, it's this model, and then this is the base query. Okay, and then basically all the logic from there is built into the class. But again, just like anything done through classes, we can override it. So you can always read the documentation to learn what are the methods that are used in that base class, and then you can redefine them if you want them to work differently. Okay, but by default, it works pretty well for building your most basic JSON API. And if you wanted to add authentication, again, in that blog post, I walked through like the additional work to add authentication, which isn't much. Okay, with the right Django libraries, it makes it pretty quick to get a lot done pretty fast. Okay, so I'm gonna head over to views, and let's see here. We want to import the view sets. So you see here, we're going to need to import a few things. So we're going to want to import view sets. So those are going to be those classes we're going to inherit from. We're going to import our to-do serializer actually, and our model, and then we're going to import these permissions because we have to actually describe like what is the permissions uh, for who can make a request of these routes. Because what it'll do is if we have authentication, we can say like, oh, permissions is, allow authenticated. So whatever authentication scheme we have, if it doesn't pass the is authenticated check, it'll just be like, no, you can't access this. Okay, so just to kind of show you how that would look like, if I go back to like the authentication piece of this, okay, we can go here and we say like, hey, the permission class permission is authenticated. And if you set up all this, which again, that'll be something you can do on your own. I'm not going to get into the JWT authentication for this particular video, but again, I do have step-by-steps for that. But yeah, so that's essentially what we're doing. We're just going to create a view set. Okay, and then again, we're going to inherit from the view set class. And basically what we're describing is what is that default query. So like, what is the query that gets you all dogs? Because that's going to be sort of like the default thing it's going to serialize. Okay, what is the class that does the serialization? Okay, which would be the serializer, and then again whatever permissions we want to do. Right now we're going to just allow anyone to make a request. Okay, so anyone who makes a request gets the response. Okay, cool. So I'm going to say import from REST framework dot viewsets import model view set, and then we want to from dot models, because we're still in the same folder, import to do from serializers, import to do serializer, and we're in good shape. Okay, so now what I do is I'm going to create my views. So I'm going to say a new class, which is going to be called to do view set, which is going to inherit from the model view set, which is going to define all the functions that we're going to want to hook up to our URL. So I don't need to, I'm not defining these individual functions. I'm just defining the things that the class, these meta pieces of information that the class uses to do what it does. Okay, so in this case, in this subclass meta, okay, I can then define additional things that the thing needs. Okay, so we're going to say like the query. Okay, let's just make sure we're using the same names. Yeah, query set, serializer class, and permission classes. So query set, okay, is going to equal, then we're going to use our to-do model, dot objects, because that's the object manager. That's the thing that we use to make queries. And we're going to say get all, although I think it's get all. So just double check, yeah, all, dot all. So many different frameworks in my head. Memorizing all the methods of every ORM gets tricky. Okay, luckily there's documentation, which is why it's always important to read docs. Okay, don't assume you know the things. Don't be afraid to read the docs. Then we pass in the serializer class, because that's what's going to do the serializing. Serializer equals to do serializer. So that's going to do the serialization into JSON. And then the last thing we want to do is pass in the permission class. And we're going to pass an array of possible permissions. Okay, but I need to import that. So from REST framework.permissions, import allow any. Okay, and then I'm just going to say allow any. Okay, let me just make sure I spelled permission class right. Yep, classes. Okay, so good thing I checked. Always make sure you have like your reference once it's never bad to like, again, refer to docs. Make sure you're doing things right. But yeah, there we go. We have our view set. Okay, so now we just need to connect this class to a thing that, well, basically what's going to happen is that Django REST framework then has another piece to help you do this. It's going to have a thing called a router built in. And the router knows how to interact with its class to generate all the different routes that you need for your REST API. Okay, so that's going to be the next step. So I'm going to head over to URLs. So we're going to bring in this routers thing, and then we're going to create a new router, and then we're going to register each view set with that router, and then we can just then pass that router to a path. We can just say, hey, all the things in that path use this. Okay, so let's do that. Let's head over to URLs. Again, we're going to use our URLs in our main default root app. So URLs. Okay, so I'm going to say from Django REST framework dot routers. import. Which one am I looking for? There's a couple different routers in there. Import routers. We want default router. So import default router. Okay, so we now have the default router. So then we're going to define a variable called router, which is going to equal a new instance of default router. Okay, so we just created the default router, and then we register our different view sets. They have to be Django REST framework view sets. So this is like a REST framework thing, and you can create as many of these view sets as you want for all the models that you have serializers for, and it's going to automatically just kind of set up all the routes, making life like super easy. Okay, and essentially what I want to do here is router.register. Okay, and then we put the name of the model. Okay, which would be dogs. I mean, not dogs. To-dos or to-do, and that's going to be the prefix. So notice how like that argument is referred to as the prefix. So it knows that hey, whatever the URL is going to be, it's going to be /to-do. Okay, and then I pass it the view set, which is going to be to-do view set, which I'm going to have to import. So from to-do.views, import to-do view set. Okay, so that's imported. And then we're going to say a path, and then we're just going to register this based on the root of the path, because again, the router is going to define all these prefixes itself. So I just need to give it the base route, and then I'm going to pass it the router dot. What am I passing here? Oh, include. I have to use the include. Okay, include, which I'll have to import in a second. Router.urls. Okay, and that's going to be coming from here. Okay, and that there. And what this does, include allows you to take like a bundle of URLs, like a bundle of routes, because essentially what this router.urls thing is, okay, this is going to be a property of the router that's actually the array of paths. In the same way, like this is an array of URL patterns, or a list of URL patterns, that router is generating a list of URL patterns connected to the functions in that view set, and then the include allows you to just connect a bunch of those predefined URL paths to this URL path. Okay, so basically it's like a sub URL path. And then that's it. Okay, now we can actually like test it out. Okay, so let's try it out. So if I go to Django, nope, Python. Well, actually first I gotta actually run the migrations and stuff. So I gotta do like Python manage.py, make migrations. Oh, something it doesn't like something. So we gotta read the error. Base name argument not specified, as it could automatically determine the name from the view set as it does not have a query set attribute. Okay, so this is on routers.py. Somewhere it didn't like it. REST framework routers.py. So we need to find which file of ours is it causing the problem. Router.register. So right here, router.register to do view set. Did I call it something else when I made the file? So let's go to. That's the other app in the other video. Let's go to do and take a look at those views. Call it to do view set. Okay. But it didn't like it. So I might have passed it in wrong. The view set. So objects.all, that's right. We did that to do.objects.all to do serializer. That all so far looks good. Base name argument not specified and could not automatically determine the name of the view set. Okay, so let me just take a look at the example in the routers that, oh, I forgot this little R because we're supposed to pass in a raw string. My bad. So this needs to be a raw string. Dogs. So let's try that again. Still doesn't like it. Let's examine router.register. dog set view. Yeah, we passed the view, and I imported the views to do view set. So that makes me wonder, has there been a change in the underlying Django REST framework library? Okay, because I've done this before and followed this pattern before, and it's worked just fine. So that must mean there may have been changes. So let's take a look. Again, documentation is our friend. Okay, so there's our serializer. That looks the way I remember it. Okay, as we just said. Okay, there's our serializer. Yeah, routers. That looks exactly set up the way we did. And okay, and again, model view set, hyperlink model serializer, include router.urls. Yeah, no, that looks exactly set up the way we have it. So let's see. Okay, so as it turns out, there is an update that wasn't reflected in the documentation to Django REST framework. So I found that out. How did I? And just so you see, like, how would you like go diagnosing these errors? I took the actual error. So in Python, generally, the error is always at the bottom of the output. So like you see here, like that last line is the error. So I copied that into Google, and I found the Stack Overflow that addressed this specific problem. So see, like in the latest version of Django REST framework, basically everything we did was fine, but we have to explicitly set this base name property. No longer something that's implicitly figured out. Okay, so now what I need to do is go over here in here and then add base name equals to do. Okay, with the model name. Okay, and then that should do it. So let's try that out. Okay, good. Migrations worked. Now let's run those migrations. So manage.py migrate. Okay, my migrations ran, so that's all looking very positive. So now we can just run our server. Python manage.py run server. Okay, server is running. So I'm going to open up Insomnia. Okay, so that way we can test this out. So right now this is running on localhost 8000, and it should be to do. Now right now there are no to dos, so technically I should just get an empty array. Okay, let's see here. Call via, oh, because I have a put. It's supposed to be get. Let's try it again. Okay, to do view set should either include a query set attribute or override the get query set method. Okay, which that should be the case unless I spelled the view set query set wrong. Yeah, it does have the query set property. Okay. So, oh, that's the wrong thing. Okay, so let's go back to here. Okay, and again, query set equals user.objects.all. That's what I did. Ah, but I see here it's not in a meta class. I think my mistake is I just automatically assumed it's in a meta class. So let me go fix that. Views. Oh, that was the wrong project. Okay, so this doesn't need to be here. Okay, perfect. Let me just make sure that that looks right. Yep. Okay, now that should update. So now let's hit send. Should either include a serializer class, which it does. This is supposed to be called serializer class now? Yes, it is supposed to be called serializer class now. I just kind of assumed. My bad. You can tell it's the day after Christmas. And that I don't write Django on a regular basis. Okay, there we go. Now let's try this out. There you go, and we got an empty array. And now I should be able to do like a post request, you know, basically standard RESTful conventions. That's the beauty of it. Like I don't need to know exactly what the code implemented is here because it's following RESTful convention. And I know whenever you follow the RESTful route, RESTful conventions, that I should be able to make a post request, the slash to do here, you know, the model name, and just be able to be passing an object that matches the schema. So title breakfast. And then, well, too many colons. Okay, and then subject eat breakfast. And then I should be able to add this in there. Ah, code URL via post, and then slash. Okay, that's just a Django thing where it always wants that trailing slash because Django's funny like that. Okay, field name subject is not valid for model to do. That's right, because it's title and details. So that's just me not remembering my own schema. But you gotta admit, we love very descriptive. This kind of, okay, well, that shouldn't be the same error. Field name subject. Oh, I must have written subject somewhere in like the serializer. Yes, I did. That should be details. Okay. Again, making sure that, again, everything's got to be consistent. So if my model is title and details, my serializer should say title and details, and so forth and so forth. I got to make sure I keep it consistent. Okay, so I hit send. Well, at least you're getting a nice tour of all the possible errors you may run into. So that's not a bad deal. Okay, so now I hit send. And now see, it works. Okay, and I'll make another one. Say lunch. And eat lunch. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, and I hit send. And now I've made a scene. We have the ID 2. Now if I go back to doing a get, see now I'm getting the array of items and so forth and so forth. Now I can go update one, so I can go like do a put request, go to slash to do one. Actually, let's make it 2 since I got that typed up. And call this like lunch 2. Okay. Oh, doesn't like that, but the URL doesn't. Oh, that's just because I typed it in there. Again, you always got to include the slash when it's Django, unless you want to do some fun regex. Okay. There we go. ID 2. Wonderful. It updates, and then if I want to delete it, I can just do a delete request, hit delete. Okay, there's no return body, but if I go back to doing a get request to do, huzzah. Okay, I've created a REST API, and with all the mistakes and all the explanation, it only took us like 30 minutes. Okay, so now in the next video, we'll take this API and I'll make a React front end for it. So you can see like, okay, how does it get used afterwards? But there's one thing I do need to add before we do that. I need to make sure I use the Django, set up the Django CORS headers. We did install that earlier. Okay, so what we need to do is go to installed apps. Okay, so we're gonna head over to our settings. Just close all this, settings, and go to installed apps, and we're just gonna add CORS headers. Okay, so that way that app is installed. Then we need to add the middleware, which we have to, it actually wants you to specifically add it in the spot. It has to be right above the common middleware. So we'll go to the middleware section, look up for common middlewares right here. So then I make a line right above it, add in the CORS middleware as prescribed by the documentation. And then I need to set the settings for what I want to allow. I want to allow all origins. Okay, so basically, again, if you only want to allow certain URLs to be able to make requests, you would just do it like that. And you just say, okay, these are the allowed origins, and then those URLs can now make requests to your API and none other. Okay, I want to allow all origins, so I'm going to do this one right here. CORS allow all origins. So I'll just copy that. And then you can just put that anywhere. Okay, and I'm just going to make that true. Okay, and that just means like now any server, like any application can make a request to this API. Now, if this is like your app for production, like this is like the thing you're releasing to the public, that's probably not what you want. You probably would want to actually have a list of where you do want requests coming from. So that way you're not getting requests from malicious actors. But again, this is a hobby project. We're not going to deploy this for this particular video series. So this just makes it where I know my React app is going to be able to make a request, and we're not going to have to get too deep down the CORS rabbit hole. But with that, this API is all set and ready to go. Again, the code will be in the repo that's in the video description. Okay, in this case, it'll be just look inside the Django 2022 folder, and you'll find it in there. But next, we'll create that React app and go from there. I'll see you all in the next video.